Episode 131 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. I'm here with a special guest, someone near and dear to me. At this point, Frank, it's been over a decade, right, since we've known each other?
Yeah, we met my junior year of high school.
Yeah. So, obviously, in studio today, we have a 2016 Olympian NCAA champ, four-time All-American Frank Molinaro. And just, I guess, to get people up to speed, we've had a relationship for a long time. Obviously, I was the guy that recruited you at Penn State, and so we have history there. But it's a great opportunity anytime to catch up. An unexpected opportunity, right?
Yeah,
Didn't think I'd be
absolutely.
running into you in Columbus, Ohio.
Nope.
If you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, I thought maybe I'd see you up at NCAAs or in 2 weeks at the Olympic trials. But obviously, with everything that's been going on, there's been a change in events for a lot of people, namely you in your training situation. So
For sure. I mean, the first time I went to Ohio, my impression of Ohio was Jeff Jordan's camp. So I came out there summer after summer, and that's where we first originally, kind of hit it off, was at Jeff Jordan's camp. I think I had just got done doing a 2-hour live session, the night session. Luckily, it wasn't after Sloppy Joe's, and we got done, went out to the parking lot. We were talking, and I knew right away I was going to go to Penn State. We had a prior relationship, but just good dude, good personality. Always had my back when I was in college. And one of the things I'd say, when I was at my best, you were right there, still right there, supporting me. When I was at my worst moment in college, still the same guy, kind of dragging me out. So yeah, we've had a long relationship. We've known each other for a really long time, and Matt's been one of the people that has believed in me when nobody else believed in my talent and ability, and really grateful for that.
It's been my pleasure. And obviously, when you're in coaching, and you've been on both sides now as an athlete and a coach, the highs that you take away from coaching, and seeing someone investing time, putting effort in their time, and to see them reach their goals and dreams, that's the ultimate. I mean,
Yeah.
Outside of doing it yourself, obviously, if any of us had our choice, we would compete until we were 100.
For sure.
At a certain point, we got to hang it up and get in the coaching.
Hopefully I don't do that. I'm just kidding.
So we're not talking about 2028 here or anything like that?
No way. My wife will shut that down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, I guess with everything that's been going on, right now you've been training in Oklahoma for the last is it almost 2 years now, or a year and a half?
Yeah, a little over a year, close to a year and a half.
So with everything that's going on with the health crisis going on in the country, everything's getting shut down. So you guys decided, how did you and Lou decide to come to Ohio and do your training out here?
So I kind of jumped to conclusions right when I heard all the news. They talked about shutting everything down, and there was a lot of uncertainty about the trials, and there were just certain certainties I couldn't have. So I figured, what's the best move I can make, in case things go on as planned? Because I don't know if they had canceled wrestling yet for the USA Wrestling. We were like the only thing in America that was still on to go. So I was like, well, if I get locked down, let's make sure I got my coach, and I can still train and get better at wrestling. And I knew that if I was trapped in Ohio, at least I'm surrounded by wrestling in Ohio, and I'm surrounded by good partners, and just good people. So we made the decision, just in case we get quarantined, let's get quarantined in a good state with good coaches. And, Coach Roselli, you want to get shut down with that guy, because you'll get better at wrestling.
Yeah. So in your mind, when you saw, as soon as you started seeing the professional leagues shutting down, in your mind, you've been around, you're like,
it's over.
It's done, right?
It's done. Yeah. It was interesting because we did it, like, it's still like, man, we still going to try to do this. But once one day passed, this thing kind of really took its toll on everything.
So immediately, what was going on in your head?
Like when all the news first came out, my first concern was just my weight control and my weight management, because that's like a big part of my success at the trials, and my success in the past has been my weight management and my weight control. So the timeline is very, important for me because the margins are so small with my weight cut. So if it was going to get pushed back, I wanted to know immediately. But the plan never changes. Every day I wake up, it's, to get better at wrestling, know more about God, and love my family. So those things have stayed the same. Some of the amenities and just kind of, I think my routine has changed, and it might change a little bit more and just have to be a little bit more flexible with, our routines and everything. But at the end of the day, I wake up and it's just to get better at wrestling. And we've been able to accomplish that still, by still getting 2 workouts a day. And, the hard part is kind of managing the downtime right now and figuring out what to do with all this downtime. I've just been kind of waiting for news. So I tried to stop waiting for any news and just be present and just try to focus on what I can control in this period. And I think for me, to be completely honest about it, being stalled out a few more months for the trials was an absolute blessing for me. I mean, I say that with, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I know this has affected a lot of people, but, my particular wrestling scenario or situation, I have more time to shrink my body down, develop my wrestling, and really put my last kind of run in the books, pending this thing doesn't continue to spiral out of control. But I'm just going to be optimistic about it.
Yeah, and I mean, you brought up the unknown. This is an unknown. So in this situation, when it's completely unknown, I guess the only thing you can do is control what's right in front of you. That's right. Literally the only thing you can do.
Yeah, and I think kind of just making sure that, my biggest thing is making sure that this doesn't make me any lazier or lose focus on what's most important. Because I think the just shutting everything down and everybody's not working, some people might take that as a reason to, just take off and just kind of hit pause in their life. And, that scares me. So I don't want myself to go backwards during this time. I want to make sure that maybe I can even take advantage of it in some sense and being slowed down and make some sort of gains out of it. So just trying to stay on the offense during this holding pattern.
Yeah. So where were you actually at? Because I was thinking about it. I ran out to Penn State last week, and I was thinking about where you were or where every athlete was in their training phase for the Olympic trials. And you're basically, had you reached your tapering, the point of where you were starting to taper? Because you were basically what, two and a half weeks out when they made the announcements, or almost 3?
Probably almost 3. Yeah. So I was about 1 more week of training, and then I was, full blown diet, weight cut, kind of low impact training type of stuff.
Yeah.
So it was just weird because it was kind of wrapping up, and then they were just starting to hear the rumblings of coronavirus, and then it just went from 0 to 100.
Yeah. No, I mean, our new reality literally just happened in 24 hours. It's like it was surreal by the time because I did it like a day trip out and back. Like I went out Thursday night, came back Friday, and in the span of that time, like reality had changed. Like parts of the business had changed, had the perspective we were changing. Family life, school was getting shut down, everything. And so where was I going with this? I guess I was thinking, so with your training, I guess the other part I was thinking about, did you just complete your training phase? Because I know a lot of guys at the senior level, they kind of break it up in 3-month blocks. When they have a competition, they've got kind of their training camp and their training phase for 3 months, compete, take a couple weeks off,
right,
reset, reboot into the next training camp. Did you actually complete your training camp for the Olympic trials, or how are you guys breaking down your training right now, you and Lou?
Yeah, so usually it's done with periodization. You have periods of volume, periods where you're training through some little bit of fatigue, just trying to make some gains. But we had gotten to the point where we were keeping our workouts under an hour. We had tapered down and got the majority of all the volume workouts in. So we were just kind of trying to stay on our same routine, because Lou, Coach Lou, he's a routine guy.
Yeah.
He likes to do things consistently. So trying to stay consistent. And we got all the way to the end of the week, and then we made that was our judgment call. Let's fly Sunday. This way we can get settled in Sunday, and then figure out how we're going to get into gyms, get workouts, all that stuff, and hit the ground running and have another solid 7 days. So the focus was really to get this week right now, while all of this stuff is getting settled, while it's unsettled, make sure that we were in a position to have at least some amenities and some workout possibilities, because they had just shut down OU's campus. And, we weren't sure like what was going to happen with the other schools in the district. So we had to, go where we can know some people. But right now it's just focus on this 7 days. I booked a one-way flight here, so I don't even know what I'm doing. Once I get to Saturday afternoon after my last workout on Saturday, then I'll just have to figure out what I'm going to do the whole next week. And then until we have more news kind of from there.
And I guess all things considered, the family's out here too.
Get the family out here. Yeah, it's good. It's good kind of spending time with at the Roselli's house too. They have 3 kids, so it's cool for my kids to be around them and just kind of interact with those guys and just kind of change things up.
Yeah. What do you walk around at right now? Like where do you typically, like, where your body's maintained? Where do you like to be on the daily?
I think my body, like when I'm eating pretty healthy, not eating out or anything, I think it likes to hold probably like 158 to 164. And then I usually like have to cut it down to 151. And then I kind of cut in from there, from about 10 pounds, 8 pounds. If I really get lucky, I can get down to like within 8 and then water cut from there or whatever I have to do. But going 65, I was contemplating whether I wanted to do the whole year at 65 kilos and try to make the national team last year. And luckily my coaches and wife and, support staff said it would be a good thing for me, even though it would be really difficult to get used to the 2-day format, get used to making scratch. And, the first time I was probably more prepared than any of the other times because I just like over prepare. And I think I cut too much weight. And then the more I made weight, the more I feel like I've been able to kind of stretch, feeling really strong and still cutting a lot of weight. So it's hard to find the balance.
Yeah. Are there 2 or 3 specific things that you need to do to feel your best? Like where does your body need to be? Like, have you dialed it into the point, like, this is where I need to be 48 hours, 24 hours. This is when I'm pulling the last couple pounds of water out. This is where I need to be. This is how close to weigh-ins I need to be. Like, get into that specific thing, because I think people are aware of the process, but I don't think they understand the detail and the nuance of how hyper specific you can get. Because with you, like, ounces matter.
Yeah.
Like literal ounces matter.
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky. My wife was a Division I gymnast, so we joke around. It's like you kind of have to be a serial killer about it. You have to know all the details. Everything has to be carefully planned, organized. And with the weight cutting portion of it, we have a weight cutting chart. And then on the weight cutting chart, we have other charts that you can see, like US Open, Bill Farrell, ranking tournament. You can see like where my numbers were, and I can go back and see how I felt during those times. So I set all these markers, throughout the schedule. And then my diet kind of changes depending on which part of my training phase I'm in. I'll eat a little bit more of this, a little bit less of this. And then my weight management plan and diet, nutrition is even different from that. So we just try to figure out all the details and then try to figure out the best way to do everything. So always just constantly learning at, is there a better way to do this nutritionally? And I'm very fortunate because one of my really close friends, he's a chiropractor, a doctor, and he's kind of a life coach, and he's given me great advice, and he has helped recondition a lot of my bad habits, eating habits, kind of just lifestyle and general health habits. So he's helped with a lot of those details, Dr. Pat Brown, and he's kind of taught me different diet, different way of doing things. The biggest struggle I've had in adjusting my training plan has been with overtraining and making sure that I take recovery seriously. And I mean, I have no choice now. At 31 years old, I have to make sure I recover, and take it seriously. But that's the one thing I'd say, if I cut corners on anything, it wasn't my diet, it wasn't my sleep, it wasn't my nutrition, it wasn't my intensity, it wasn't my competitiveness, it was my recovery a little bit. So that's one of the things that he's kind of helped me and kind of given me more advice. But yeah, just with the weight cut, there's certain numbers I hit, but there's certain things that I need mentally and physically as well. I think it's important. In the past, I've become too much of a nerd about my diet, and then I get so fixated on like diet and everything that it takes me away from like that primal mentality where I got to win this fight. So I got to make sure that at the end of the day, no matter how much weight I'm going to pull, and no matter how, scratchy I might feel after weigh-ins, I still have to feel like I can pick the guy up and throw him down. So I have to feel strong physically, and I have to know that my legs are physically strong, because if I can finish the match with strong legs and still have my power and endurance and cardio, I really like my chances.
Yeah.
So that's the goal.
I mean, you touched on a bunch of things that as coaches, like, we know the critical importance of rest, diet, nutrition, all these little things. And typically when you're even the best college guys, when you're talking to them, you kind of know in the back of your mind as a coach, like, they don't really believe it, number one, or understand the importance of it. Take me through the phase of like when you came to the realization, like the epiphany is like, oh, every little ounce is important. And what ounces I put in, and when did that light switch go on? Like, oh yeah, my diet, my nutrition, how I put it in, when I put it in is important. And then the recovery portion too, because, and maybe that's a two-part question, because I would like to get into your specific training, because I know that's probably was the hardest thing for you to ever do, is saying, I've got to dial it back. So let's jump into the food part, and when it really clicked for you, like, how critically important this is to your performance.
Yeah. Just to kind of rewind one step, and just even that mindset in general, I have like a good memory, so I can kind of think back to times in my life where the light bulb, you kind of flip that switch in your head and say, oh, I get it now. And then I'm going to go all in on this idea. And a story that really stuck out to me in college, we heard a story before practice about a guy who planted two identical trees next to each other, and they were planted in the same soil. They came from the same farm when they bought the trees, and one of the trees got 100% of the sunlight, so there was nothing obstructing it from the sun. And then another one of the trees had, 75% of it was getting sun, but there was 25% of it being obstructed. And, in wrestling context, you can have a kid that does 100% of the things right, and then you can have someone that does 75% of the things right, and you might not see a difference after 1 year, after 5 years, after 10 years, but after 50 years of this tree getting 100% of the sunlight and this one getting 75%, this one grows gigantic and reaches its biggest potential. This one eventually not getting all the sunlight, maybe cutting some corners. Eventually the branches start to fall off and the tree starts to die off and it doesn't reach its potential. So the story was just a lesson for me that, the little things matter the most. And, it's not glorious, because it's like, you're not going to see the validation maybe in 1 year or 2 years or 10 years. So it could take 20 years, but it's the way it works. So I believed in it. And I really believe that the way for me to win as a wrestler, because I didn't think I was as talented as some of the other kids and the moves came easier. And when I was little, they had more success than I did. They got more attention from the coaches than I did. So I knew my only way was to work hard, and I believe that hard work works. So I just, anything that was something that could give me an advantage, I tried to leave no stone unturned. But I think as wrestlers, we still kind of, you can brush off like the nutrition. You can brush off, some of the recovery stuff and think like, I'm tougher than it, but for me, it reached a certain point that I had no answer. I couldn't like outwill myself to cut from 165 pounds to 143 pounds and be able to, wrestle Jordan Oliver at the World Team Trials. I knew I had to learn more. I knew I had to think outside the box. I knew I had to think differently. And the hardest part is just kind of reconditioning the way I approach my diet and the way I approach, just being more professional about wrestling. When you get away with it when you're young, and you're young, so you make mistakes, but then you get older, and I think it's really on you to continue to innovate. But what's forced me to innovate more than anything is just not getting what I wanted, not getting the results I wanted. And, it's either I just continue to do the same thing or I make changes, and pay closer attention to the details. And, that's kind of where it led me, is into some different diet ideas and some different recovery ideas. And, I try not to get, because earlier on I'd get too obsessed with like one thing. It's like, all right, now people are getting like scientific about like heart rate and all this other stuff. And it's like, I just try to make sure that I don't put all my confidence in that stuff, that I just take bits and pieces from it, because I think everybody out there has got a good system and they got a good way of doing things. And, I don't think that one person can say they have the best way of doing something. I think it's more of be resourceful, take as much as you can from Coach Dernlan, take as much as you can from Coach Roselli, and just have good mentors and have humility and be willing to, implement some of the things, be willing to be wrong. And I've learned a lot from just being around good mentors and being around good people who have not only done things the right way, but they have the right mentality. They're lifelong learners. They continue to learn. They don't think they know everything. So that's being around the right people is, the key in my eyes to really take you to the next level and reprogram yourself for success.
Yeah. So let's turn that into your training, because and you said a couple things that were interesting. And I think all wrestlers and all coaches sometimes can fall into the trap, like we can out tough the situation.
Yeah,
right.
It's
like at the end of the day, we're wrestlers. We're just going to freaking out tough it. Yeah. And it doesn't matter, because we're conditioned that way. We're coached that way. It's like, it doesn't matter. You just out tough it. You've got to will yourself through the situation. But, when it came to your training, and I know, because we've talked about in the past, like, even though I believe you're one of the most talented guys I've ever been around, a lot of athletes can say, I don't have as much, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a good motivating thing.
For sure.
And it motivates you to work harder if you need to do that extra step or extra set, or that, extra live go, or that extra conditioning, or the, extra set in the weight room, whatever. You're just like, it's that chip or that voice inside of your head that's pushing you to out tough it and do more. And not only are you one of the most talented guys I've been around, you probably have the highest work ethic I've ever been around. Like, I even remember in college, Frank's like, when's this guy going to shut it down? Like, hey, Frank, you can't wrestle for 4 straight hours. You got to shut it down. You just can't physically do it. So even back in college, like, which you love, it's messed up as a coach in the sense, like, on one sense, you've got to train smart, but when you find someone with just, you don't have to push them. Mm-hmm. You don't have to motivate them. You don't have to play any mind games to bring out the work ethic. Sometimes as a coach, like, I just want to let this guy go and go and go, because it's easy. Coaching this guy is easy. I just need to make sure you're managing him the right way. So how has that mentality changed, knowing that you have to train smart and that more is not better? More is actually detrimental.
Yeah. Well, it's really kind of taught me how to swallow some pride and kind of lose my ego completely, because, I have to be smart sometimes. And, there's certain days where I got to know when to pull back, or I'll get injured or hurt, or, and the last thing I ever want is to not be able to wrestle, because lifting's great, running's great, all that other stuff is great. But if you want to get better at wrestling, you got to wrestle, and you got to be on the mats, and you got to get the reps in, you got to get the spar in and get the, get that training in. So making sure that I'm healthy for my wrestling and for my live wrestling is probably the most important thing. But, I think there was a 2-year period where I got 2-3 years of getting too focused on being scientific and training smart. And from my own personal experience, I think it made me a little bit soft. and I kind of regressed. And, I reached a certain point where I just, I couldn't take it anymore. And I just felt like I had gotten softer as a wrestler. And it wasn't from training smarter. I always encourage training smarter and being intentional about everything, and I think there's a time and a place where you got to get tough and get hard and last a little bit longer and push a little bit harder and gas yourself out. But there's also a point of chronic excess, where every single day, if you push yourself to that threshold and break yourself and you do it again and you do it again and you do it again and you do it again, then it becomes chronic excess. So there's definitely a fine line, and I always flirt with that line, but I do value the other side of that line where I break myself and last a little bit longer, or the days where I want to get real scientific about it, but who knows? Maybe we got a partner in the room that day. He's a good wrestler and he's just in town for one day and he wants to do some matches. It's like, I'm not going to sit there and get on the bike that day. I'm going to challenge myself and get hard and get uncomfortable. So I try to make sure that I use the peak performance training model as best as I can and plan things accordingly and carefully. But I always try to make sure that the fight and the mental fitness is number one, and the training is number two. The training is all mindless. I like the training. I like, that portion of it, all of the suffering and the working out. I think the key for me is normally, if I'm at my best, my mental fitness is at my best. So my mindset is good and I'm prepared to fight. My mind is prepared to fight. And, some of that could be a training thing, because some of it is, you got to be emotionally fresh. And if you're overtrained and you don't taper, then you won't be at that state of mind. But some of it's also a spiritual thing for me. I think it's getting myself in the right headspace where I've done all the training on the front end of it, and now I'm ready to compete. So if it was a sliding scale and you said, how mental is wrestling? Well, I'd say it depends on what part of my training phase I'm in. If I'm in 3 months out of competition, it's 1% mental, because now I'm just trying to beat the crap out of my body and beat my skills down and beat my body down and try to reach a level of mastery in my body. And then the closer you get to the competition, maybe you're halfway through your training, it's 50% mental. Now you're starting to kind of get yourself in the right headspace, and you're also still kind of mastering skills in the body. The night before, it's 99% mental. If I'm not in the right headspace here, I will not win at this level. Maybe at other levels, but at the level I have to compete at, I think if I'm in the right headspace, 99% mental the night before. So if you can get it right here, I think that you can win the match. So, it all depends on what part of my training I'm in, but the most important part for me personally is the mental fitness, my mental health going into the competition. Am I emotionally fresh? Am I spiritually, is my soul at rest? And then, if I haven't mastered the skills in the body in the beginning of my training, then I can't just let go and compete unconsciously and present and enthusiastically, because then I'm not sure if I am ready if I reach that point and I cut corners here. So, for me, it's very cerebral and, very contemplative approach. I just like to think things through, because I know I can't shut my mind off half the time during the day. So I try to, prepare my mind when I'm at a 1% mental. I try to prepare it by living in the state of mind that I want to compete in. So if I want to compete present, I'm not thinking about anything. I have a clear mind and I want to compete with a light heart, so I don't want anything weighing me down. I don't want to have any expectations of the future or outcomes or any of that stuff. So a lot of my mental training in the beginning is just trying to slowly introduce that stuff and those behaviors into my training. So then when I get on the tail end of it and I can shut down the training and I can shut down and have that stillness, my mind is ready to go because I trained it. That's the goal.
Yeah. So it's I think that's where people misunderstand training smart, because we hear that a lot right now. People are like, we train smart, and people equate training smart. It's like, oh, he's training easier or he's not maxing out. It's like, no, like in your, like you said, at the beginning of your training cycle, the 3-week training cycle, it's all physical. It's hardcore training. It's still hardcore. You're pushing your body beyond its physical limits.
Right.
And as you trickle through down to 1 month, 3 month down to 1 month, then you take that confidence from your training has got to shift into a confidence of belief, because you're tapering it down. You're still maxing out and training hard, but the shift is elevating it to the confidence and the belief of the mind and not the belief in the body, because the belief in the body took place 3 months ago.
Exactly.
And you've got to maintain that, right?
Yep.
How hard was that though? How hard was that transition? And even though we've been in contact, I haven't been around you on the daily for quite some time. So when did that period of belief and transition take place? Because you've rotated as well. And I want to get into this at some point, from Penn State, Rutgers, back to Penn State, Virginia Tech, now Oklahoma. During what portion of that training? Was it before the Olympics? Was it after the Olympics? And,
Well, I really started believing in the mental side of things in college. I had a pretty strong, I had good high school coaches, Coach Stout, Coach Tab, Coach Roy. They were all very good with, toughening us up. They taught us how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. It's a cliche message that we say all the time, but if you truly are ingrained with that spirit, that gives you mental toughness. You can push through a lot of things, but I think the mental side of it, took place probably closer to the Penn State. When I was at Penn State, that's when I really started to begin to develop my mentality and begin to pay more attention to what I was paying attention to. Then I started to realize that, I was responsible for everything that I was thinking and saying. And, then I started to think I have more power over, controlling some of my thoughts and behaviors. And the next thing I knew, it was like, that's where I was putting a lot of my time into. A lot of my time and energy, was spent in wrestling, of course, but a lot of it is spent, just trying to work things out in my own head, trying to figure things out, trying to, develop the right mental routine, to go out there and compete at my best, develop the right focus to be in practice and get the most out of my workouts. And just, I think that part can't get taken lightly. It's so important, because when push comes to shove and you're out there and you're in a fight, yes, it's important that you did all the work and you tried to, master the body in the beginning of the training. But if you didn't conquer your mind, or you didn't master the mind, or at least attempt to, your mind is going to talk you out of it. So you have to have a strong mind. So that's where I think in college it really switched over to making sure that, I paid more attention to what I was thinking. Also periodization, made sure that everything wasn't just an all-out wake up and assault, not just wake up and go crazy every day. Because I thought that was an advantage for me. I thought it was doing something good for me for a long time, until, Doc Brown told me, about chronic excess, and talked about periodization. He talked about, volume. He talked about even, something crazy. That's kind of my new thing I've been on, and it's called the perceived effort ratio. And it's at the ratio.
Yeah. What's that?
It's at the ratio you perceive how hard you're going. So it's called PE, perceived effort. And it's like, you can't really take accurate measurements from just doing your heart rate during workout. Like you can get some patterns and some good information, but I get the best information by my perceived effort. And Monday, for example, Monday is my highest perceived effort. This is like the day where he allows me to kind of break myself, take myself to the edge. And if I want to jump over the cliff a few times during that workout, I can do that. Then on Tuesday, I switch into more of this is like a counter offense type of focus day, where I'm kind of just staying in good position, staying in a good stance, not trying to just throw the guy down the whole practice. My perceived effort's medium intensity. And then, maybe my Wednesday morning technique workout, my perceived effort in that workout is it's at a 2 to 4. So he has a sliding scale of 1 to 10. and 1 being like, I'm getting ready to walk into church, and 10 being like, the Hulk mode. You want to go the Hulk mode, so we try to break it down and have more generalizations where it's these, like Monday, the week's always the same. Like my day is always structured the same. My routine changes a little bit here and there, but the most important thing is the perceived effort, in the workouts themselves, because if I don't monitor my intensity levels, I can go in there and do a light lift and make it like a 10 out of 10 lift. I'm just in there doing a circuit training, but I'm taking myself to like an inch of my, threshold.
So how long did it take you to dial in what that percent, what my 50% is? Because it sounds like a lot. I was having a conversation with Pat Santoro the other day, and we were talking about the difficulty of teaching kids how to play wrestle or spar, like understanding that, like it's probably one of the hardest things to teach, because it is perception, is feel, it's more intuitive what you're trying to get out of. So in the perceived effort training, like how long did it take you to find like this is my 40 to 60 range, this is my 30 to 50 range, this is my 80 to 100 range?
Yeah, that's a good question. It probably took like 3 months, because in the beginning, I'll be completely honest, it was just like an idea when he told it to me, and it was something I kind of thought about and played around with. But now it's it's kind of been a part of my wrestling strategy too. There's certain points in the match where now I can just say, hey, just go to a 10, or hey, we're at like a 6 right now, like hand fight, clear ties, pressure forward, move your feet, that type of stuff. So it took me a good 3 months to really understand what levels I was at, because one thing Coach Roselli always tells me, it's it's about our new normal, and it's just about trying to create a new normal. Like for example, you get done doing 5 30-second stance motion goes with Coach Roselli yelling it out, you're exhausted. Or you do a sprint clean hold workout and you think you're tired and you're hyperventilating, and it's like, you think you're at a 10 there, but you can do another one and go a little bit further. So it's like trying to figure out what your new normal is and making that max out 10 super high. So for me, I'd say it took me a while to figure out like when I was actually at a 10 and when I was actually thinking I was at a 10, to find that fine line. And
it's got to be the toughest part, right? In training, like your mind is the toughest thing to control, because your mind constantly wants to lie to you,
wants
right?
to pull you back.
It constantly wants to tell you untruths, because you're redlining it at different times. It's like, no, this is not comfortable. Like, and most of the times, even approaching the work is like, I don't really want to do this. I don't want to subject. So your body, you have to constantly overcome your mind in that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You have to overcome your mind, and you have to season your mind, because some people might just be too sensitive to that feeling of being overwhelmed, and vulnerable. I think when you get real tired and your lizard brain kicks on and it starts trying to talk you out of things, I think we just listen to our mind too much. And one of the things, again, Coach Roselli, one of the things he's taught me is just when I get to that point, to just not, it's not about listening to myself anymore. In order to reach mind mastery, the people that like write books on it, what they'll tell you the same thing, and the same thing I try to teach myself is to not listen to your mind when you get to those places. Instead, talk to your mind, feed your mind. Because my mind is telling me to quit. You're too old. You can't do this. You don't got enough. You missed your mark. Whatever. Whatever your mind's gonna tell you, but you start feeding your mind what you want it to hear, and you last a little bit longer. I think that's the key, not just in a sense of age, in my case where you wrestle really long, in a stance of, resistance. If you can push into resistance and last a little bit longer, and then that becomes your mentality, eventually you look back and, you're in a completely new level that you didn't even think you can get to, because you're just committed to, reaching that point where you push into that resistance and you want to quit, and your mind wants you to quit, and your mind is telling you to quit, and your physical body is telling you to quit, but you last a little bit longer. Eventually you become less sensitive to your body trying to tell you to quit, and you become less accustomed to listening to your mind when you're overwhelmed. And, then it becomes your new normal where you're under fire and you're overwhelmed and you're under attack by your mind, but you can still move forward. And I think that's my goal with my training. And that's, the same thing that I'll try to demonstrate to kids in wrestling and coaching. And it's just lasts a little bit longer, figure out how to talk yourself into getting to that threshold every single day and then pushing it back a little bit further. What will you do to last a little bit longer when you want to quit? And that's kind of the things, that's the place where I focus on creating more space, in my head. How can I equip myself with the right thoughts and have an action plan when I reach that place in practice where I want to quit? What am I going to do to keep going a little bit further? And that's kind of where I focus on.
So how critical is it when you're talking about your perceived effort training, how critical is it to have someone like Lou that also understands your percentages about where you need to be? Like either pushing you up to that if you're supposed to be in the 90 to 100% range, and he's like, he's not quite there, or no, I got to pull him back a little. He's going too much. Like he's supposed to be in that 50%, but he's redlining. He's going over that. I got to pull him back. How important is that to have a guy like Lou with you that understands not only you, but where those effort percentages have to be?
It's important too, because, there's a time and a place where he's going to need to get on me and make me go harder. But there's also a time and a place where he's going to have to pull me back too, on the other side of it. I feel like in this situation, it's hardly a case where we're trying to go harder. It's probably more like make sure that he's, being smart. And if today is just a recovery day, that I'm not getting too crazy and getting excited. But the thing about Lou is he puts the time in and puts you through all the workouts. Therefore, he can make a good assessment and get a good read on the athlete and get a good read on, where I'm at physically and what adjustments should be made. So I think, a big part of it is like knowing your athletes and putting in the time with them, putting them through the workouts in the morning, putting them through the workouts in the afternoon. You're with these guys day and night, you can start to get a sense of where they're at and a feel. And when the relationship is good, I think that's vital for success. Is you got to have a good personal coach. And, you got a good personal coach and you got a good relationship, then it makes it a lot easier to have good communication and be on the same page with all of the training and everything. So it's just helped in the sense that Lou's put the time in with me. He's, running a college program full time and trying to take over the world. But at the same time, he's available 24/7 if I need to get a workout or if I have a question. So, that's made it real easy for him to make the judgment call on, I just show up and do what I'm told. That's it.
Yeah. And I guess let's talk.
But there are cases where I'll come in there with, 2 knee pads on or something, and he'll be like, all right, just take the knee pads off. You're fine. Or like, Coach, I think I should probably do some more like cardio today. He goes, what for? What's wrong with you? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay, actually. I think I'm okay.
And it's good. It's still, you still need that guy, right?
It's made me tougher, for sure.
Because it's, I think a lot of coaches, and that's a testament to Lou, a lot of coaches would probably defer to your experience, to where you've been and how well you understand yourself. Absolutely. A lot of people would be like, no, he knows him at this point at 32 years old, 31, 32. Yeah. It doesn't matter, right? You know your body better than anybody else. And so I think a lot of coaches would say, no, he probably knows. Let him go easier. Let him take a day off. But it's nice to still have that guy's like, nah, BS.
It is nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a privilege.
Yeah.
Guys, it's a privilege to have somebody that cares enough that's going to get on your case. It's like if your coach isn't getting on your case, then you got bigger problems. You got to get noticed.
Yeah. I always told my guys when I was coaching, like, look, if you can want it tougher than I want it, if you can want it tougher on yourself than I want it tougher on you, you're going to be in a really good place because
Amen to that.
A lot of people say they want accountability until they're held accountable, right?
Yes.
And then they get emotional and they get upset and like, this guy doesn't like me or he's a jerk or whatever. But it's really so. Yeah, people say like, no, I want it tough. I want it. Hold me accountable. I'm like, no, do you really?
Yeah, right.
I was like, because when I do and you don't like it, I'm going to remind you of this conversation, right?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think when you get to that point of maturity in your mind's like, I need it tough. Like as tough as I am, even I will look to take outs at certain times. And I need that person that no matter what is going to be tougher on me than I can be on myself, right?
Especially when you're in times of being vulnerable. I think that's where you really need that person who has the heart to keep you accountable and tell you what you don't want to hear. So I always appreciate when I have those people in my life that care enough to tell me, either when I'm doing something stupid and I should change, or the people that, they're right there for me and making sure that telling me the hard stuff I need to hear, because I'd rather know than, just live in a false reality or a dream world or, because I want to win. I'm in this thing to win. I love wrestling and I love the craft of it. And, I love just every day we get to go to practice. I get that stuff. I'm very grateful for that. But, I want to finish strong. So I want to make sure that I'm doing everything correct and I give myself the best opportunity to win. So it's been very helpful to have somebody that, has been so accountable, because I think in the past I've always done a good job of, keeping myself accountable to my goals and just like my training and all that type of stuff. But there were a lot of ways I was doing things, where I might have, if had I not seen it from the other side, it would have changed my perspective. So now I've seen things on both sides of the spectrum. I've been with Oklahoma State guys, Ohio State guys, Penn State guys. I've had great coaches all throughout my whole career, and they've all had good systems and they've all had good mentalities and they've all had different ways of doing things. So I've just always tried to stay open-minded. And I think, in my case, I've been lucky enough that God has put me around the right people throughout my career. So I think, you see a lot of consistencies with all different types of coaching styles, but, the one that can't get undervalued is working hard, because, you can get cute about the training and you can get scientific about things and you can find different ways and more functional ways of doing things, but you can't get around suffering and you can't get around hard work. And, I'd say that's probably the number one thing that comes to mind with Lou is his work ethic. And I'd say number two is probably toughness. So making sure that we just never lose sight of, you have to do the work day in and day out, and you have to be consistent, and I think that's one thing that's helped me. I think I've developed more consistency in my technical proficiency, and I've developed more consistency in, kind of mental fitness, because we just stick to the same routine. Monday is the same day as it is in January, as it will be in December, and for me, I really like the systematic approach. I'm a little bit compulsive and OCD about things, so I like to have a routine and I like things to be systematic so I can just do the work and not worry about what I should be doing. And Lou really values the work and he really values the toughness. So, it's been a good fit for me being in Oklahoma. And, I've also got other great mentors there. I've got Mike Leitner, also a great wrestler, 4-time All-American, undefeated national champion. I think he might have beat Brands for a world team, and he was in the hunt to make the Olympic team. So he's very technical, a lot of skills. He's a great wrestler too, so I'm able to gain more information from him and just great people all around me. So I think so one thing I love about wrestling is the best wrestlers in our sport, they're very accessible and they're very good at sharing knowledge with the people behind them. Because even when I was growing up, I'd watch YouTube and I'd watch Kerry Colott video. I mean, I watched every video I could find on Kerry Colott. He had like 1,000. You type in his name in YouTube, 1,000 videos pop up.
Yeah.
Like, he literally gives it all out for free. So, shout out to him for that. That's a really cool thing that he takes the time, but also has the passion to want people to get better at wrestling. Like, he wants people to have that information. He's not charging them anything. He's not trying to Winn-Dixie anyone for it. You click here and then next. No, he's just giving people the wrestling because he knows it's going to help the sport, help people get better at wrestling. So, I just value and appreciate those things, and, it's good stuff.
Well, I know. I mean, right before this, when we were eating lunch, I mean, that's the toughest thing for Lou right now. It's not that it's not the situation. It's his passion. He's being removed from his passion. He wants to teach. He wants to give. That's what we are as coaches. We're educators, teachers. That's our passion. And to take that away, like, what, I can't give my knowledge to someone?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the great thing, like you said with Kerry. It's like, he just wants people to learn. He loves wrestling. He's so passionate about wrestling.
Right.
He just wants to give it away. It's like, yeah, I've been blessed to know this. And I know most people aren't as, lucky to have the opportunity to get exposed to all these things. So that's, coaches just love to give.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
the other thing the thing that you touched on was suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the end of the day, that's where most guys hang it up.
Right.
Is they can't wrap their mind around the level of suffering that you have to do to get the rewards that you want.
Mm-hmm.
They still want the rewards, but they're not willing to suffer to the extent that they know they have to still suffer. And I think it's what we talked about, how your mind can start to lie to yourself.
Right.
No matter how accomplished you become, your mind will want to tell yourself lies like, hey, I've won X amount of national titles. I've made these world teams. I've won these world medals. Therefore, I don't need to suffer as much because I've earned this. I've earned this status, and I'll never retreat from it or back from it. But you will.
Yeah.
If you back away from suffering, you're backing away from the mentality that you can't get what you want.
No.
Right?
No. And I remember Bruce Burnett told me something funny a couple of years ago. He goes, "Don't ever make being old an excuse to be tired." He's like,
no.
Don't ever make your age a reason why you're tired. He's like, it's no excuse. And the second part of that, what you were saying, it's exactly right. I mean, you have to reframe the way you view suffering. And I have had to. I've had to like brainwash myself into changing the way I viewed suffering, because at the end of the day, all suffering, all growth takes some form of suffering. So, therefore, if you want to be a great wrestler, you're going to have to endure a lot of suffering. And if you want to endure a lot of suffering, I think the only way to do that is to enjoy it. So you're not, the second you stop, say you're very tired, but you're having a fun workout with all your friends and you guys are all exhausted. The second you stop enjoying that fatigue, you're defeated within like 10 seconds. The second you stop enjoying being tired and feel like, it's a privilege to be able to be put through these workouts, it becomes exponentially harder. So reframing the way I view suffering and trying to view it as a good thing, a good position, like when I feel that feeling of vulnerability in suffering, is kind of clicking it on in my mind and thinking like, oh, this is good. This is a good thing. This is exactly where I need to be. This is the only place that I'm going to grow. I'm making gains right now.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just through pure repetition and just becoming more comfortable and kind of getting creative and thinking outside of the box. And I think it's really opened me up to make more gains, and not just from like physical body gains. I think from my mindset, being able to endure more suffering mentally has increased my capacity to be able to, push through things. I think resiliency is a big one with suffering, because with our sport, you could walk in the tournament thinking you're ready to take over the world, and leave feeling like a homeless guy. You know, it's like, why did I even think I was good at wrestling in the first place? Why did I even wrestle? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's tough. You know, like the setbacks are real in wrestling, and they're real sudden too. So, you know, I think being able to deal with it on that side of it, putting your heart and soul and wholeheartedly believing that you're going to accomplish this goal and falling short, you know, how do you manage that suffering? How long does it take you to recalibrate and get back on track? You know, or are you one of those people that you can just deal with hard times and push and still move forward while you're suffering through this setback? So I think, you know, I try to take it just as serious mentally, you know, and again, Doc Brown, my wife, people in my life that have helped me, they've helped me decrease the amount of time I spend between having that catastrophic failure, catastrophic setback, and reframing my mindset and getting right back on track. Because in the past, like, you know, I would have points in time, I didn't realize I did this, where, you know, I'd lose and the self-sabotage was just horrendous. You know, I would just like beat myself down thinking I had to do that. And it became harder and harder to recover from the setbacks doing it that way. You know, I reached a certain point where it's like I couldn't even recover from the setback. I just wanted to quit, you know, and when I really talked myself out of it, and this is kind of the point in time where, you know, insert God in my life. You know, I reach a certain point where like all of my striving comes to a cease, and then I can't overcome this setback. In 2015, it just feels like I'm stuck. It feels like my life is like in despair, and everything is coming, you know, coming to an end, and I don't have an answer. And I always have an answer. Like I always have my next step, my next plan, you know, and I keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And then, you know, I have this moment in my life where I have this awakening, you know, and I feel the presence of God, and it physically changed the entire trajectory of everything in my life, my mindset, my thinking, my training. So I get to go back to that question you said before, what was the point in time where it all changed? And I would say that was probably the real crucible moment in my life where things became alive. I became awake to my mind. You know, I became awake to things that I was never awake to. And, you know, those things and those beliefs and those truths that I've submitted to memory and tried to live by on a daily basis, I think they kind of also help my perspective with the suffering and wrestling and mindset and outcomes and all of that stuff more than anything else, just to be clear.
Yeah. So in that, I was thinking about, I think a lot of people, when they think about suffering too, and we'll move on from this after this, but the suffering aspect is fascinating to me.
Me too.
I think a lot of people think they equate suffering with your physical activity, but you know, when you really break it down and you look at it at your age, and I want to get into that. I think 32 is nothing. I think you're better now than you were at 22. I really do.
Thanks.
Because I think you're more invested. You know more. You have more faith in it. You have a deeper understanding. I think the way our knowledge has grown in training and recovery, like nutrition, all these things, supplementation.
Mm-hmm.
I think all these things that if you take advantage of them at the highest level, that's why we're not laughing at Tom Brady saying I can play quarterback till 45, right? You know, wow. I mean, 10 years ago, even 10 years ago, you would have been laughed at about it. But
for sure, you
know, going back to the suffering, I don't think people understand, like, suffering comes with that discipline, with your diet, like with your diet, with how you're invested in your training, the lifestyle that you lead, it's not really sacrifices because it's a choice of what you're doing, but how you're living your life. Like every area of your life, it's training included. Most people just equate training as like, I'm going to beat myself so I physically feel something. Like, no, but suffering is disciplining yourself and conditioning yourself and doing things that no one else is willing to do. And to do that in those other areas, I think even at this age, maybe you still enjoy training, but it's the other areas. It's the other areas where guys don't like to continue to suffer, where they're like, I just can't do this anymore. I can do the wrestling thing, but I just don't want to do these other areas as much or to the level that you have to do them on. So I think it's the suffering outside of training that's difficult to maintain over a duration of time than the actual physical training itself.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think a big part of it is just identifying your priorities. So, I like to I wear this bracelet. It says God, family, and gold. And to keep it real simple, I have 3 filters, and everything that goes into my body and everything that goes through my mind, I try to filter them through those 3 things. And those 3 things are my priorities. So God, family, and gold. So just making sure that, all of my decision-making process, making sure that God, family, gold is a part of all of that. And gold is not gold medals. It's just a gold standard of giving a full effort, giving a gold medal kind of push towards everything that I'm doing. And, I just think that makes it a lot easier too. But like you said, that was well said. It's like they're suffering for doing your diet the right way because it's not glamorous. You're not going to get much validation out of it, but it's essential, quintessential to reaching the peak performance and the highest level. You can't cut any corners. It's like not only do you have to do every little thing right, you have to have something unique about you that sets you apart from everybody else. Maybe it's like you have a certain skill set or a certain trade that like trumps people, or a certain move or a strategy. So it's like you gotta, man, you might be able to get away with some of that stuff at earlier stages, but you're gonna have to suffer at all levels: body, mind, diet, all that stuff. So I think just understanding early on, you're gonna have to convince yourself to love it and convince yourself to filter all of your decisions because at a certain point I reached a point in my life where I realized like nothing was more important than God, family, and gold. But wrestling, every day, we were joking about this yesterday, we try to make every day a masterpiece, meaning everything is planned, everything is intentional, and everything revolves around getting better at wrestling. For example, you wake up in the morning, you got your own morning routine, and this is to get yourself set on the right tracks so you can have a good workout in the morning, have the right focus, have the right nutrition in you, be warmed up right, be showered right so you get the most out of it. You get done with that workout, then there's certain foods you eat, then maybe you read, maybe you take a nap, maybe you meditate, maybe you do some wrestling journaling, watch some film, work on some mindset stuff, then you go to practice. And then you're done with practice. Then from 6 to 11, like that's your rec time where you kind of decompress, get ready for the next day, process information. So everything, every little decision and little thing you do during your day, it's all revolving around getting the most out of your wrestling. If that's what you're passionate about, if wrestling is your craft, then why wouldn't you wake up every single day and try to do every little thing you can do? And you got to have grace on yourself. That's one thing I've realized with age is like just having more grace on myself. Just being able to laugh at myself when I screw up, especially when I screw up real bad, like being able to have like a little like sense of humor about it. And just even on the regular things, like instead of beating myself down, like I have a bad day with my diet or, maybe I just fell short at the end of practice there. It's just not beating myself down thinking it's going to be good for me, like just being tough enough to realize it's just one workout. My wife always says if you have a bathtub full of piping hot water and you throw one cold cup of water in there, it's not going to change the temperature. So that's where I've had to learn. In that specific case, I've had to learn really to have that grace on myself and be able to just say like, it's not the end of the world. It's one workout, it's one move, it's one scramble. And the more I've been able to do that and learn how to have quick grace on myself, it really helps me get even more uncomfortable, because me and Dom Demas, we could wrestle an hour straight in practice and there's just no ego. We don't care about winning and losing. We don't care about proving who's tougher or none of that stuff. So if I screw up and I get arm thrown and slammed on my head, so what? I'm going to come back up and slam him the next go. But it's really enabled us to get better at wrestling because there's no egos. When there's no egos and you can really just let it fly, you can really know what you're capable of and know what you can do. And then I can have the humility to be able to assess myself a little bit better because, I've got more invested in it because I know what effort I put out there. So,
and I think that's one of the things that I took away when we were talking a little bit a year and a half, a year ago, when you were looking for a new training situation.
mm-hmm.
I'm like, after we got off the phone, I'm like, it's really impressive. Like, I'm trying to remember our conversation. One, it was like you knew what you needed. Like at this point, it's like, Derns, I know what I need out of my training. But what impressed me most was like you were still open to new things. Like,
for sure.
I know what I need, and I need to be in a place where I have to get these things. But I'm still open to growing and learning and getting different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think when we were talking, when that conversation was like, you were completely wide open. Like, I'll go anywhere. Like, I'm just hungry. It doesn't need to be like you're past the point where it's got to be a name location or a name coach or something that's a lot of times I think guys go to a place because they think it's going to guarantee them a certain outcome. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like,
no.
If you're looking for that, you're dead in the water already. You're dead man walking. It ain't going to happen. You ain't making a team with that mentality. Right.
No.
But obviously there's reasons why some of the better places are the better places consistently. But that's the one thing that what I was impressed about you is like still at your age and everything you've accomplished, like, no, I still want to grow. I'm still open to learning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I try to, this year, one of the things I tried to make my New Year's resolution was to choose faith over control as many times as possible. For example, for me, one thing I struggle with is, I'm always kind of looking ahead. I like to be a few moves ahead, even with my wrestling. I like to be a few steps ahead, so trying to get to the point in my own mind where I get to a situation where I'm trying to control a future where I can just, have faith and be present and stay in the present moment. So, sometimes we always want to have these finite outcomes. I want to know this exact outcome and become fixated on it. But the risk of doing that is then you're limiting the entire universe to one outcome. And who knows? I might think this is the best outcome for me. I might show up at the tournament and pin the guy in the finals. There's infinite amount of outcomes. So what's more important than me having certain certainties that I can't have is me having that present, like, being present and being in the moment. So, when things got to a point where I was trying to make my next move and I was a little bit overwhelmed and I had a choice of what direction to go in. Was I going to give in and be overwhelmed and try to control this situation or have faith? What I did was I chose faith, and I chose to, kind of let things play out organically, go to the people that have always given me sage advice, who have always been in my corner when I was at my most low and my most high, because, those are the people that are real, the people that are genuine. Go talk to these people, my group of my circle, and let them give me some advice. And then I'll digest that information. I'll download it all and kind of see what pops up next. And luckily I just stayed patient and stayed present. And, the whole Roselli thing kind of came out of the clear blue, and the timing of it all was definitely God ordained. I mean, I could snap my fingers and, it could have been like this thing. You're on your couch one day and you wake up and there's coronavirus. So I was on my couch one day and I was in my normal routine, a little frustrated with myself. I snapped my fingers and I was in a house in Norman, driving in a car to practice. It was like, it was awesome, and it was one of those things where I didn't try to force it. I just tried to do the next best thing, got myself to a point where, I needed to fix some things, and could have been a situation where I could have beat myself down like I would have in the past, but having that grace on myself and just kind of staying present and staying hopeful. And sure enough, the next best thing came across my plate, and I jumped on it. And, this has been a real good one for me, a good career move in terms of like experience and just mentorship. I definitely got more than I bargained for. Not that I didn't have high expectations going into it, that obviously it would help me improve and all that and that stuff. But I think there were some other things that I hadn't even considered, being my age and my experience. There were things that I hadn't considered and kind of some wisdom, that I didn't know yet and didn't even really think about. So it ended up being really, really successful for me because now I've not only gained wrestling knowledge, I've gained life wisdom, but it all started from just having faith in God and going to the people that I trust when I'm vulnerable and trusting them to make the best decision because I know they have my best interest in heart. So if I'm going to people and getting their advice, I know they're not going to just try to lead me in one direction that's going to benefit them. They're trying to lead me in the best direction because they know my passion and my personality. So
heading in, I mean, the element of faith, obviously, there's faith that this will happen, that the Olympic trials will happen. That's the next step, right? If and when, we don't know.
Yep.
Or when, I think if it will,
mm-hmm.
When we don't know.
We don't
so
know.
When it does,
yeah.
Like, let's talk about that. And maybe this is probably a good place to wrap this up. This next series of questions is talking about the trials and talking about Tokyo.
Sure.
And, I think the normal thing, like just normal people in society, they're like, man, what, why is he still doing this?
Yeah.
He already made the Olympic team. He had an unbelievable run in 2016. Like, what's there left to capture in the sport? You've done everything, national champ, team champs, Olympic teams. Like,
mm-hmm.
You've articulated over the last hour, like you've got the passion.
Sure.
You've got the passion. You like to suffer. You've got all the things that, why wouldn't you? Right?
Yeah.
But why are you?
That's a good question. I think, to be completely honest, I feel like I kind of had that itch on my heart. I feel like God put that itch on my heart at a certain point in time, that I could be the best in the world. And when he put that itch on my heart, I was so far away from that goal. So far away from that goal that it's insane for me to even think that at the point in time where I had that aspiration. But, I held it real close to my chest and I kept it at arm's length for a really long time. And, with that mentality, sure enough, eventually I broke through, and 27 years old, I had this breakthrough. I beat all these guys that, had been successful against me in the past. And, I didn't reach that goal. I believed I could be the best in the world. I believed I can reach the pinnacle of the sport. And, for me, growing up as a kid, my father and I would always say, I think I can beat anyone on any given day. Like, that was like his motivational thing for me. Any tournament we went to, I'd go to the Tournament of Champions and get my butt whipped one year, and the next year I come back and I'd have one good win, but then a bad tournament, and he kept telling me, you can beat anyone on any given day, and then one day I just decided to believe it, and I still believe it. But I also believe in, the other thing my father told me, which was to finish strong. That was like, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And that's probably the number one lesson I've ever learned. And, after 2016, my bronze match, I give my absolute ultimate effort. Everything in my life was devoted to keeping myself in the right state of mind, physically and mentally and spiritually, until that last second where I didn't get that takedown for that bronze match. And I just remember walking off the mat and thinking, like, darn, like, I wasn't mad at myself because I thought I should have did something differently, like made some bonehead mistake or one of those things. It was more so I felt like I got to get back here and try this again. I know I can do this. Like, I definitely sabotaged myself a little bit at some point in this. And I think that with the right experience and, with the right amount of time, I think I can do it because I know I can put the work in and I know I'm tough enough to beat anybody on any given day. So, why not? If you got a chance, to reach the pinnacle of your sport, a legitimate chance, you know, you got to take it. All you need is a chance. It's like, I know people who are clear-cut favorites for all different types of roles and situations in life, and the door looks wide open to them and they go to run through and it slams shut. So you never really know. You can feel good about it, like it's going to happen and all that stuff. But for me, my pursuit in wrestling has led me to God, and it's led me closer and closer to God. The further I've decided to extend my wrestling career and, kind of get a little crazy. Now I'm getting a little bit older, so it's extended pretty far, but I mean, it's a spiritual thing for me. I've gotten closer and closer, and I've had to depend on God more and more during this journey. So what I've gained, even if I win the Olympics, so what in comparison to what I've gained in view of God? My view of God is much larger now after, just the resiliency of wrestling 8 to 10 years after college, but my number one reason is because, I just want to reach the pinnacle of the sport. And I feel like I'm still in a position with my age, my body, and my mind where I can achieve it. I think a lot of things have to go right. But, the thing about my confidence, it's not in myself. My confidence is in God. With man, it's impossible for a 31-year-old guy with 3 kids to win the Olympic trials. And, it's impossible for a kid that never wrestled one freestyle tournament as a kid growing up, didn't wrestle freestyle till 2012. I was coaching for 2 years and then moved to Penn State, back to Penn State for a year, and I made the Olympic team. I had no experience. I had no moves. My strategy, I'll tell you right now, my strategy was don't let anyone get lower than your head, meaning like, you might as well wear a helmet if you were going to wrestle me because, listen, my head is like a bowling ball. I was going to head block every shot, and I was focused on not let anyone get lower than my head, keep the match within arm's reach because I know if there's 30 seconds left and I'm within one takedown, I'll throw anyone down right now. I'll throw anyone down, take them down. So that's how simple my strategy was. It's not like now where it's like, you get a little bit older. Wrestling has evolved tremendously, so it's a lot, it's more about making intelligent decisions, making good decisions on the edge, strategy, being one step ahead, turns on top, that type of stuff. But it was real primal in 2016, and I was able to accomplish it then, when I was just wrestling on grit. Now I've still got some grit and I've got some developed mindset and seasoned mind. And now I have, the Roselli skills. I've got, multiple turns on top. So I'm in a better position now to win the Olympic trials and go to the Olympics and win the Olympics, and also one thing that we can't forget is experience is a real thing. People say I've been there, done that, and it makes a difference. You go win your first state title. It's like, it means the world to you. You go back and win the next year and you just expect to win.
Yeah.
You go back the third year, it's like, you don't even want to be there. I mean, like, is it college yet? Like, I just want to be chasing something again.
Yeah.
So, I definitely like chasing something. And another reason why I continued to wrestle all these years was I wanted to keep myself against the flame for as long as I could, keep the pressure and the heat on myself for as long as I could, and continue to develop and evolve in the sport, because, you can start coaching. And if I would have stopped coaching and stayed at Rutgers, I would have never, met Bruce Burnett and Lou Roselli and been to here and been to these training camps and went to this country and learned from Dagestan and learned from Makachalov and went to Ukraine and learned this move and wrestled this guy. So it's like I've picked up, I knew at the very least, whether I wasn't getting the results or making the Olympic team, I knew at the very least I was getting the experience that was going to make me a better coach, a better mentor, and a better person, when I hung the shoes up. And then I was focused all in on coaching. So, I really wanted to get out there and get download as much information as possible, download as much experience as possible, process it, try to reach my maximum human potential. And, now I can have all that information to go back and be the best possible coach I can be on the next phase of my life. So, You know, some of it was for an investment in myself for my coaching career after. You know, some of it was because it's one thing in my life where it makes me vulnerable in a sense, you know, where I've had to depend on God to kind of get this far, you know, and I just love just competing and fighting. You know, I love fighting, and I wish in some sense I would have got to enter that realm of like UFC and that type of stuff and fighting, because I just really like the element of fighting and just competitiveness. And, you know, I think wrestling's just one of those sports where it develops grit, you know, more than any other sport.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of great sports, don't get me wrong, but I just think wrestling's one of those sports that tests me like no other. So to answer your question, I'd say it's about reaching the pinnacle of the sport, about gaining experience, and about just kind of having a greater view of God at the end of the day.
No, I appreciate it, Frank. And
No
I still run into people a lot, and they want to talk about wrestling. And then they talk about individuals that I used to coach or be around, and your name always comes up. And they're like,
Thanks.
you know, what do you think? Can Frank do it this year? I'm like, well, number one, I was like, I've never been around a greater winner in my life. This guy knows how to win.
Thanks. That's
like
a good compliment.
Cash him out, count him out, whatever the scoreboard looks like, this guy knows how to win. I was like, so I would never. I was like, yeah, I'm biased. I have a bias when it comes to Frank Molinaro. I would never bet against this guy. When everything's on the line, if he's out there, I ain't betting against this guy. And number two, I was like, it really doesn't matter what you think his chances are. It only matters what he thinks.
Yeah,
and I know
that.
what's in his heart, what's in his mind. There is no quit. There is no doubt. He will make the 2020 team. So, Frank, I appreciate it. Anytime I can talk to you, you know, it's a special thing. It's few and far between with everything that we got going on in our lives. So for you making the time out, I know you had some free time. You can't train. We talked about training smart, so you can't train 24 hours a day out here. But no, really, I really appreciate you coming in today, taking some time out. And I think, you know, a lot of the things you shared are valuable things for everybody to be exposed to. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Terrence. Appreciate it.